Hey there, if you're listening, can you do me a quick favor and hit that like and subscribe button? It really helps. And tell me, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? It's just past midnight here. Rain taps a steady, quiet rhythm against the side window of this little rental cabin, nestled deep in a wooded hollow. You're finally settled, or at least, you thought you were. The drive out here was a winding, unlit tunnel of trees, ending at a gravel patch that felt more like a forgotten clearing than a driveway. The host's instructions, sent by text, had been clear but oddly specific. The key is in the lockbox. Don't touch the chain. It's a bit temperamental, but it'll unlock if you wiggle the cover just so. You'd managed to retrieve the key after a struggle, the metal box stubbornly refusing to open in the growing dusk. As you twisted the small, warm key in the main door, you heard a faint, distinct clink from behind you, from where the lockbox hung on its chain near the porch light. You chalked it up to the wind, or maybe the chain just settling after your efforts. Now, hours later, the cabin is quiet, save for the rain. You've made a mug of tea, the steam a comforting curl in the dim kitchen light, and tried to forget the host's strange instruction. Why was the chain temperamental? What did that even mean? The silence in the house is thick, the kind that swallows sound, making your own breathing feel too loud. You're just about to turn in when you hear it again. A faint, metallic scraping sound. It's coming from outside, from the porch area. It's not the rain this time. This sound is different, deliberate. It sounds like something dragging. You hesitate, the mug still warm in your hands. Your first thought is a wild animal, maybe a raccoon, trying to get into something. But the sound repeats, a softer, almost rhythmic, scrape-grammage clink. It's distinct, a tiny metallic complaint against the backdrop of the steady drizzle. You walk quietly to the living room window, pulling back a corner of the curtain. The porch light is off. You didn't turn it off. Had it always been off? You remember fumbling for the lockbox in the dim light provided by your phone. No, you're sure the host had mentioned leaving it on. You edge closer to the front door, your bare feet silent on the worn floorboards. Your phone is clutched tight in one hand. You peer through the small peephole. All you can see is a distorted, dark expanse of porch, glistening with rain. Nothing moving. You press your ear to the door, holding your breath. The rain sounds louder now, a rushing waterfall on the roof. And beneath it, still, that soft scrape. Then, a faint rattle, the sound of the lockbox chain. It's definitely the lockbox. You know it. It sounds like someone is trying to, very gently, very carefully, pull at it, or perhaps trying to replace something within it. Your heart begins to thump, a heavy drum against your ribs. You back away from the door slowly, your eyes scanning the living room for anything at all, that might offer a sense of security. The phone feels too small, too fragile. You turn on the living room lights, just a small lamp, hoping the sudden glow might send whatever or whoever is out there away. The scraping stops instantly. Silence, only the rain. You stand frozen, listening, waiting. You check your phone, 1:17 a.m. You consider calling for help, but who would you call? The host? The emergency number? What would you even say? There's a strange noise, maybe someone playing with a lockbox outside my remote rental cabin. You pull back the curtain again, just a hair. Nothing. The porch light is still out, but then you notice something. The lockbox, barely visible in the dark, looks different. It looks slightly ajar. You pull the curtain tight again, your hand shaking slightly. You know you secured that lockbox, carefully pushing the cover down until it clicked. The rain continues its steady whisper against the cabin's roof, a rhythmic backdrop that usually soothes. But tonight, it only amplifies the quiet unease. After the strange incident with the lockbox and the vanished porch light, you'd retreated further into the rental, trying to shake off the prickling sensation that you weren't quite alone. You told yourself it was just the isolation, your imagination playing tricks. You poured another cup of tea, the warmth, a small comfort in your hands, and tried to focus on the soft glow of your phone. But there's a new chill, not the kind that drafts in from an open window, but something deeper, more insistent. It's localized too. The tiny kitchen feels warm enough, the air circulating from the small electric heater doing its job. But the moment you step into the main living area, what the host's listing called the hearth room, a distinct cold wraps around you. It feels like walking into a different climate zone entirely. You shiver, pulling your sweater tighter, even though the thermostat on the wall reads a perfectly respectable 70 degrees. You walk toward the large stone fireplace that dominates one wall, its empty grate a dark, gaping maw in the dim light. The chill seems strongest right here, radiating outwards like a silent breath. You check the windows again, running your palm along the frames. Locked, sealed, no obvious gaps or cracks. The heavy wooden door to the outside is double bolted, just as you left it. You even push the thermostat up another 2 degrees, though you know it won't make a difference to asterisks this kind of cold. It's an internal chill, almost oppressive in its stillness. You approach the fireplace cautiously, the soles of your feet protesting against the sudden drop in temperature on the rug. You bend down, peering into the sooty depths of the hearth. There's no residual heat, of course, no embers from a forgotten fire, just cold ash, and the faint, unmistakable smell of damp earth, oddly potent here, even though the rain is outside. It's not the smell of damp wood or old smoke. It's raw, like freshly turned soil, incongruous in a cabin that smells mostly of pine cleaner and stale coffee. You reach out a hand, hovering it an inch from the rough-hewn stones of the mantelpiece. The cold doesn't just emanate from the opening. The entire structure feels unnaturally cold to the touch, colder than any stone in a heated house should be. It feels like the stone has been holding onto a deep, ancient chill, releasing it now. You trace your fingers over the smooth, dark face of a small, rectangular stone embedded just above the hearth. A stone that looks different from the others, almost like a cap or a plug. It's colder than anything else. You press your palm against it, and a deep, penetrating cold seeps into your skin, sending a shiver right up your arm. It's not just a draft, you realize. This cold feels deliberate, like something is being kept at bay, or perhaps something is seeping through. The rain outside continues, oblivious, but inside, this hearth room feels like a pocket of forgotten winter. You step back, rubbing your hand, the lingering cold a phantom touch. You can still feel it, that strange coldness, even now, miles away from the stone. What kind of chill can settle so deeply into a place, radiating out from the very walls? And what does it mean when a warmth, a human presence, feels powerless to dispel it? The rain had followed you. A persistent drumming presence against the roof and windows of this new rental, a small 2-story house in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. It felt safer, certainly, than the isolated cabin or the roadside diner. You'd spent the morning trying to shake off the lingering anxiety, meticulously double-checking every lock, every window, even the obscure pantry door. You'd tried to convince yourself the eyes at the general store, the knocking at the last rental, the wet footprints, they were all just stress, coincidences, your imagination hyper-alert. Now, as dusk settled early, thick with rain clouds, a new, mundane task presented itself. You were searching for a spare pillow, something firmer than the one on the bed. The closet in the hallway near the main bedroom seemed the most logical place. You opened its bifold doors, and the faint, unmistakable smell of old wood and dry dust drifted out. Inside, among some neatly folded towels and extra linens, you spotted it. Not a closet shelf, but a square panel set into the ceiling, flush with the drywall, the access point to the attic. You'd seen these before, a common feature in many homes. Usually they're perfectly sealed, maybe painted over. But this one wasn't. A thin, dark line was visible along one edge of the panel. It wasn't completely closed. It was ajar, just barely. A sliver of darkness, a hairline fracture in the smooth ceiling, perhaps a quarter of an inch wide. A cold, dry breath seemed to emanate from that narrow gap, subtly different from the regular house air. You stood on tiptoe, straining to get a better look, your heart giving a single, nervous thump against your ribs. The previous cabin, with its inexplicable noises from above the locked room, flashed through your mind. You reached up, your fingers brushing against the rough painted wood of the panel. It felt strangely light, as if it wasn't fully settled in its frame. You could feel a subtle current of air, a faint, stale gust pushing down from the opening. It carried with it that dry, dusty scent, but also something else, something sharper, like old paper or dried leaves. You listened, straining your ears over the constant wash of the rain. Nothing. The house was utterly silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen. You pulled your phone out, flicked on its flashlight, and aimed the beam at the gap. The light cut into the darkness, illuminating a thin edge of rough, splintered wood. Beyond that, it was just black, an impenetrable void. No insulation visible, no stored boxes, just pure, deep darkness. You pressed your ear to the panel, holding your breath. A soft creak. Was it the house settling? Or something else? It sounded like the delicate shift of old wood, a weight being borne. The panel was simply resting there, not latched, not locked, just held in place by gravity. A quiet invitation to the dark space above. The thought of reaching up, pushing it open, made your stomach clench. What would you see? What was up there, in the hidden space above a house that was supposed to be a refuge? It felt like another deliberate anomaly, a quiet question mark left behind. What secrets do these unseen spaces hold? And what does it mean when they aren't quite closed, leaving just a sliver for the unknown to seep through? The rain had settled into a soft, murmuring rhythm against the windows of the suburban rental. You'd closed the closet door, leaving the attic access panel with its unsettling sliver of darkness behind. The house, blessedly, remained quiet, but that quiet now felt heavy, charged with unspoken questions. You needed a distraction, something solid and tangible to anchor you back to the ordinary. You found yourself drawn to the living room, a space that, despite its generic furniture, felt the most lived in and least threatening. In one corner, beneath a window overlooking the rain-slicked backyard, sat a large, old cedar chest. Its dark wood gleamed faintly in the dim evening light, and it looked like a decorative piece, perhaps meant for extra blankets. You ran a hand over its smooth, cool surface, the wood feeling surprisingly solid. The faint, sweet scent of cedar, mingled with something older, like dried leaves and dust, emanated from it. You lifted the heavy lid. It opened with a soft, protesting creak, revealing not blankets, but a trove of neatly stacked, yellowed papers and old cloth-bound books. A shiver traced its way down your spine. This wasn't just a storage chest. It felt like a time capsule. You carefully lifted the top book. It was an old ledger, its pages brittle, filled with elegant, looping handwriting in faded brown ink. You could make out dates, names, and what looked like inventory lists, but also strange, abbreviated notes and symbols that made no immediate sense. The papers smelled profoundly old, of forgotten things and enclosed spaces. You set the ledger aside and reached for a stack of loose papers beneath it. These were handwritten letters, tied with a thin, faded ribbon. As you carefully untied it, the rustling of the dry paper was surprisingly loud in the hushed room. The first letter, dated almost a century ago, was addressed to a "Dear Eleanor." The handwriting was delicate, almost spidery. You scanned a few lines, your eyes catching fragments. "The cold won't leave us. The children hear things from the north wall. He watches, even now." A cold dread began to seep into your chest. The rain outside seemed to intensify its drumming. Or perhaps it was just your heightened senses. You quickly glanced at the other letters, their faded ink hinting at more unsettling stories. One mentioned the family plot, another a disappearance. The names weren't familiar, but the general tone, the underlying anxiety was palpable. The reference to the cold and things from the north wall echoed the strange chill and unexplained sounds from the previous cabin. Was this a connection, or just a cruel, unsettling coincidence? You closed the chest slowly, the cedar scent feeling suddenly suffocating. The papers lay hidden once more, but their stories, their century-old whispers, now seemed to hang in the air around you. These weren't just dusty relics, they felt like fragments of a long-buried narrative, secrets left behind for an unwitting discoverer. How many quiet houses hold these kinds of hidden histories, waiting in drawers and chests for someone to stumble upon them? And what happens when the past isn't quite content to stay buried in forgotten pages? The rain continued its soft, relentless drumming, a constant, low murmur against the windows of the suburban rental. You'd carefully closed the cedar chest, the unsettling letters tucked away, but their words still echoed in your mind. The reference to "the children hear things from the north wall" felt disturbingly close to home, especially after the sounds from the attic in the previous cabin. You were trying to ground yourself, to find some ordinary comfort, but the world felt subtly off-kilter. You decided to call it a night, hoping sleep would offer a temporary reprieve. You turned off the living room lights, plunging the room into shadow, illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked window. As your eyes adjusted, you moved towards the bedroom, your bare feet soft on the carpet. The house felt quiet, a stillness that was almost a presence in itself. You reached the bedroom door, your hand on the cool metal knob. Just before you pushed it open, your eyes drifted to the window at the end of the hallway. It was a tall, narrow window, mostly obscured by the thick, rain-soaked bush outside. But through a small, clear patch on the glass, you could see a sliver of the neighboring house. It was dark, a silent silhouette against the gray, rainy night. And then you saw it, a shadow. Not a trick of the light, not the movement of a branch. This was a distinct, human-shaped shadow, visible in the upper corner of one of the neighboring house's windows. It was perfectly still, a dark cutout against the almost black interior of the house. It was positioned in a way that suggested someone standing there, looking directly across the narrow gap between the houses, looking right at your window. Your breath hitched. You froze. Every muscle tensed, your eyes locked onto that unmoving shadow. The rain continued its soft drumming, a relentless, indifferent rhythm. The neighboring house was supposed to be empty, according to the host's brief welcome message. The folks next door are away for the week. But that was clearly not true. You stood there, unmoving, for what felt like an eternity, your heart hammering against your ribs. The shadow didn't stir. It simply remained, a silent, watchful presence. It wasn't the kind of shadow that shifts with the light or flickers with movement. It was solid, deliberate, an imprint of something static and observing. You slowly, carefully took a step back, your hand reaching for your phone. You considered calling someone, but who? What would you even say? There's a shadow in my neighbor's window, and I think they're watching me? In the dim light, the house felt suddenly larger, the space between you and that shadow terrifyingly thin. You forced yourself to look away, to break the connection, but the image was seared into your mind, that silent, human-shaped presence, watching. You knew, with a certainty that settled cold and heavy in your stomach, that it wasn't a trick of the light, or a figment of your overactive imagination. It was real. Someone was there, and they were watching. What is it that makes us feel so utterly exposed, so vulnerable, when we realize we've been observed without our knowledge, turning a simple, quiet night into a chilling theater of unseen eyes? The soft, persistent drumming of morning rain was a gentle counterpoint to the fragile peace you felt. Dawn had finally broken through the heavy cloud cover, painting the suburban rental's kitchen with a weak gray light. After the endless, watchful night, the shadow in the neighbor's window, the relentless sense of being pursued, the simple act of brewing coffee felt like a small, hard-won victory. The steam curled lazily from your mug, and the aroma of fresh coffee was a comforting anchor in a world that had felt increasingly adrift. You'd meticulously checked every lock and window again before even touching the coffee maker. It was a new ritual, born from the unsettling experiences of the past days. Front door, double bolted, living room windows, latched tight, bedroom, secured. The house felt, for the first time in a long time, truly sealed. You took a sip of your coffee. The warmth, a welcome reassurance against the lingering chill of the early morning. Your eyes, however, kept drifting to the kitchen's back door. It was a plain, white-painted door, leading out to a small, enclosed patio, now slick with rain. You'd checked it last night, of course, thrown the deadbolt, and engaged the small, sliding latch. You remembered the reassuring 20 click of the lock, the firm pull to confirm its security. It was the last thing you checked. Now, in the pale morning light, something felt subtly wrong. It was the way the door sat in its frame, a faint gap visible around the edges, letting in a whisper of cool, damp air. You set your mug down and walked towards it, a knot beginning to form in your stomach. Your hand went to the deadbolt. It was unlocked, completely retracted, and the small, sliding latch, which you had definitely pushed firmly into place, was also disengaged, resting open. Your breath caught in your throat. You stared at the simple metal mechanisms, then at the door itself. It hadn't been forced, no splintered wood, no scratch marks around the lock plate. It simply wasn't secured. It sat there, unlatched, unlocked, as if someone had merely opened it, and then gently pulled it closed without bothering to engage the bolts. You reached out a trembling hand, pushing the door inward slightly. It swung open a bare inch with a faint creak, letting in a rush of cool, wet air and the sharper sound of the rain outside. The small patio beyond was deserted, glistening wetly under the gray sky. No footprints, no disturbance in the fallen leaves and puddles. Nothing to suggest recent entry from the outside. But that only made it worse. If nothing came in, had something gone out? Or, more terrifyingly, had someone been inside with you all night, quietly making their exit in the pre-dawn hours, leaving the door unlocked as a silent, undeniable message? You remembered the wet footprint on the rug at the cabin, the feeling of a presence that defied locked doors. The rain felt heavier now, each drop a tiny accusation. You slowly, carefully, pushed the door shut, listening for the comforting thunk of the latch, the solid, tight stack of the deadbolt. But the sense of security was gone, replaced by a cold, insidious dread. What does it mean when your most diligent efforts at safety are quietly, effortlessly undone, leaving you to wonder if the threat was ever really outside at all? The soft drumming of rain on the cabin roof had almost lulled you into a false sense of security. You were trying to rationalize the strange, pervasive chill from the hearth room, the unsettling memory of the locked box, and the vanished porch light. The cabin felt quiet again, the kind of quiet that lets you hear the settling of old wood, the distant drip of water from the eaves. You had just started to convince yourself that the isolation was simply playing tricks on your mind, that you were just overtired. Then you heard it, a faint creak, high above. Not the kind of random house noise you'd dismiss. This had a deliberate weight, a heavier pressure than a simple settling beam. You stopped, holding your breath, your ears straining against the rain's constant whisper. The cabin was advertised as a single story, 2 bedrooms. There was no upstairs in the listing, no mention of an attic, nothing that should create such a sound. But the sound was definitely from above you, originating somewhere directly over the small, unused second bedroom, the one with the firmly locked door and the faded private sign that the host had pointedly mentioned. Another creak, slower this time, almost like someone shifting their weight, adjusting. You walked quietly into that unused bedroom. The air felt heavy, stagnant. The ceiling here was a flat expanse of textured drywall, no visible access panel, no pull-down ladder. You stood directly beneath where the sound seemed to originate, your gaze fixed upward, willing it to reveal something. Then, a light gleam, as if something small, perhaps a book or a heavy fabric item, had been set down, followed by a quiet drag, like a heavy box being carefully moved across rough floorboards. Your eyes darted around the small, empty room. The host had explicitly stated this room was for storage only. Please do not enter. But the sound came from above it. The door to this room, of course, was locked from the outside, just as you'd found it. The sounds continued, soft but undeniable. A slow, careful shuffle, then a distinct, gentle tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, almost like someone measuring something or tapping out a rhythm, methodical and precise. You stepped back, your heart hammering against your ribs, a cold dread seeping into your bones. You pulled out your phone, its screen casting an anemic glow across the unfamiliar walls. You scrolled through the rental listing again, desperate for any mention of an attic, any accessible space above, anything that could explain this. Nothing. Just photos of the main living areas and the 2 accessible bedrooms. Yet, above you, the rhythmic tapping continued, now accompanied by a faint rustling, like old fabric being disturbed, or paper shifting. It was definitely coming from Tulse inside the structure, not the wind playing tricks on the roof or branches scraping. You could feel faint vibrations through the ceiling, a subtle thrum against your scalp, a tactile confirmation of the unseen presence. What were they doing up there, in a space that shouldn't exist, above a room you weren't even supposed to enter? And how did they get in? The rain outside kept up its steady beat, a relentless, indifferent sound that only highlighted your isolation. You felt a cold knot of dread tighten in your stomach. You were alone, truly alone, with something unseen moving just above you, as if the ceiling was merely a thin membrane separating you from an unknown, active presence. How do you deal with a presence you can hear but can't account for? A sound that says, someone is here, in a place that should, by all accounts, be completely empty. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had picked up a little heavier droplets drumming against the roof and splashing into the overgrown bushes outside the kitchen window. You'd moved away from the locked private room, the echoes of those inexplicable sounds above it still prickling at the back of your mind. The chill from the hearth room still lingered too, a persistent, unwelcoming presence. You found yourself drawn to the kitchen, almost unconsciously, seeking the mundane comfort of a glass of water. A simple, normal action in a cabin that felt anything but normal. The kitchen, with its pale yellow walls and slightly humming refrigerator, felt like a small island of normalcy. You filled a glass, the cold tap water a stark contrast to the lingering unease. As you lifted the glass to your lips, a soft, distinct scrape brushed against the window pane right beside you. You froze. It was too low for a tree branch, too gentle for the driving rain. It sounded almost like a fingernail or a thin piece of wood being dragged lightly across the glass. You slowly lowered the glass, every muscle tensed, your breath held tight in your chest. The rain continued its general roar, but beneath it, the scraping repeated. Scrape, 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 asterisk. It was methodical, deliberate, moving slowly from one side of the window to the other, then back again. Your eyes locked onto the window. It was old, a single pane set in a wooden frame, without any blinds or curtains. Only a thin film of condensation on the inside obscured the view slightly. Outside it was pitch black, a wall of watery darkness punctuated by the faint, distorted reflections of the kitchen lights. You could see nothing, but you could hear Snanta Kanzan. The scraping wasn't just on the glass. Now you could hear a faint, almost imperceptible creak that seemed to come from the window frame itself, as if light pressure was being applied. You took a single, slow step closer, your heart thumping against your ribs like a trapped bird. You needed to see, to understand. You wiped a patch of condensation from the glass with your sleeve. The outside was still an impenetrable void of rain and darkness. But the scraping stopped. Suddenly, a new sound, even softer, emerged from just outside the window. A faint, wet taut. Like something soft and heavy had been gently placed on the ground, directly beneath the window. Then, silence again, save for the insistent rain. You pressed your face against the cold glass, trying to pierce the darkness, to see past your own reflection. Nothing. Just the wet, shiny leaves of a bush that grew too close to the house, glistening under the distant, hazy glow from the kitchen light. You reached for the window lock, a small brass latch. It was firmly secured. You checked the window's seal, running your fingers along the seam. Everything felt solid. But the scrape had been undeniable, and the soft thud afterward. You backed away from the window, your gaze still fixed on that dark, wet pane. The air in the kitchen, once comforting, now felt charged with an invisible presence, an unspoken question. Someone, or something, had been right there, outside the glass, trying to get your attention, or perhaps trying something more. Was it just a curious animal, drawn by the light? Or was it something more deliberate, a quiet probe from whatever was making the cabin feel so unsettled? The thought of that slow, rhythmic scrape, so close, in the dark, makes your skin crawl. What exactly was it that just touched your window, and why did it leave that soft, wet thing on the ground before disappearing into the pouring rain? The rain had settled into a steady, persistent rhythm outside, a ceaseless shush against the windows and roof. After the scrape at the kitchen window and the unshakable chill from the hearth, you'd retreated to the main bedroom, trying to find a corner of this rental that felt truly safe. The sounds from above the locked, private room had thankfully ceased, but the quiet that followed felt less like peace and more like a held breath. You pulled on an extra layer, the cabin air feeling heavier than it should, despite the heater working overtime. You decided to try and read. To distract your mind from the unsettling incidents, you eyed the small wooden nightstand beside the bed. A plain, unremarkable piece of furniture. Surely, a remote, a local guide, anything mundane might be tucked away in its drawer. You reached for the simple brass pull, the metal surprisingly cool beneath your fingertips. With a faint creak of old wood, the drawer slid open. Inside, it was mostly empty. A single dog-eared paperback, a crumpled tissue, and then, tucked neatly beneath them, a photograph. It was old, certainly. A small, faded print in black and white, the edges soft with age. You picked it up carefully. The paper felt thin, almost brittle, and carried a faint, musty scent, like old attics and forgotten things. It was a group shot, taken outdoors, in front of a house that looked strikingly similar to this cabin, though perhaps decades ago. The porch looked a little different, the trees younger, but the overall structure was undeniable. In the photograph, a family stood posed, a man, a woman, and 2 small children. They weren't smiling much, as was common in old photos, but their expressions weren't entirely neutral either. There was a somber quality to their gaze, a subtle tension in their postures, as if they were enduring the moment rather than enjoying it. Your eyes lingered on the details. The clothes were old-fashioned, the children's faces blurry with time, but then you noticed it. Tucked just behind the woman, almost obscured by her arm, was a 5th figure. They were mostly in shadow, a darker shape blending with the background. It was hard to make out any features, but you could tell it was a person, standing slightly apart, looking not at the camera, but subtly, unmistakably, at the man in the center of the family. The host hadn't mentioned any previous owners, only that this was a family cabin, recently renovated for guests. You turned the photograph over. The back was blank, no names, no dates, just the faint texture of the old paper. You flipped it back to the front, your gaze returning to that shadowy figure, half hidden, watching. The rain outside picked up, a sudden burst of heavier drops, making you flinch. This wasn't a family photo meant for display. It was hidden, tucked away. It felt too personal, too revealing, for a rental property. The host, with their strange instructions and evasive answers, suddenly came to mind. Why hide something like this in a guest nightstand? What was the story of this family, and that lurking figure in the background? And more unnervingly, who was it that looked at this photo last? And why did they leave it here, in a drawer meant for strangers? The rain had settled into a steady, hypnotic drumming against the cabin, a sound that usually brings comfort, but now felt like a relentless reminder of your isolation. You'd carefully placed the old, faded photograph back into the nightstand drawer, the image of the family and that shadowy 5th figure burning in your mind. The hidden nature of it, tucked away, felt heavy with unspoken history, and the persistent chill from the hearthroom still seemed to cling to the air, making your skin prickle. You were trying to shake off the growing dread, telling yourself that old photos are just old photos, and cabins creak. You stepped out of the bedroom, needing to move, to break the spell of the quiet room. The hallway was dimly lit by a single overhead fixture, casting long shadows. As you turned, your gaze fell to the worn area rug that stretched from the bedroom door into the living space. And then you saw it, a dark, distinct shape on the otherwise dry, patterned wool. It was a footprint, undeniably human, a clear outline of a bare foot, toes and heel visible, dark and damp against the lighter fibers. It wasn't muddy, just wet, as if someone had walked in from the rain and stepped directly onto the rug. Your breath caught in your throat, a sharp, cold intake of air. You knelt, slowly, your hand hovering just inches above the print. The fibers of the rug around the mark were matted down, compressed by recent weight. It was undeniably wet. You could almost feel the cold dampness radiating off it. This wasn't some old stain or a trick of the light. This was fresh, a wet foot. Inside the cabin, your mind raced. The front door was double bolted. You'd checked it repeatedly after the lockbox incident. You had also made sure all the windows were latched. There was a back door, a plain, unadorned wooden door in the kitchen, leading out to a small, enclosed porch. You scrambled to your feet, heart hammering against your ribs, and practically ran to the kitchen. The back door was, just as you'd left it, securely bolted from the inside. The deadbolt was thrown, the smaller latch firmly in place. You ran your hand over the frame, checked the small window pane embedded in the door itself. All secure. You stared at the simple, solid wood, then back at the hallway where the footprint lay. It made no sense. How could a wet footprint be inside a cabin with all doors and windows securely locked, in the middle of a steady rainstorm? You walked back to the rug, tracing the outline of the print with your eyes. It pointed towards the living area, away from the bedroom. It felt like a deliberate mark, a quiet, undeniable sign of entry. The rain outside seemed to mock your efforts at security, its endless patter, a constant reminder of the wet world just beyond the cabin walls. Who could leave such a tangible sign, such an undeniable proof of presence, in a place that should be impenetrable? And if they were here, just moments ago, where did they go? The steady, insistent drumming of rain against your windshield had been your only companion for what felt like endless hours. You'd driven straight through the night, the memory of that wet footprint on the rug, the inexplicable cold from the hearth, and the shadowy figure in the old photograph refusing to fade. Every creak of the cabin had echoed in your mind. Every shadow seemed to move. Sleep was impossible. So you'd packed what you could, thrown it in the car, and just memoed on a rug. Now the gas gauge was hovering dangerously close to empty, and the narrow, winding road felt like a tunnel through an impenetrable wall of trees. Then, a distant, flickering neon sign pierced the oppressive darkness. General Store and Gas. A single, blessed beacon. You steered your car down a short gravel turnoff, the tires crunching loudly, then splashing through puddles as you pulled up to the lone pump. The rain was easing now, a lighter, more rhythmic drizzle. The only other vehicle was an ancient mud-splattered pickup truck, parked haphazardly near the entrance of the store. Its windows were fogged and no lights were on inside. You shiver as you step out of the car, the damp night air instantly clinging to your clothes. The air smells of wet earth and distant pine. The fluorescent hum from inside the store is the only sound apart from the rain. You grab the cold, wet pump handle, the plastic slick in your grip, and start filling your tank. Your eyes automatically scan the surroundings. Nothing but trees, darkness, and the faint glimmer of the store's windows. This place feels utterly isolated. You finish pumping, carefully replacing the nozzle, and head for the store entrance, the little bell above the door jingling faintly as you push it open. The interior is brightly lit, almost glaringly so, and smells faintly of old coffee and dust. An elderly woman, her face a road map of wrinkles, sits behind the counter, staring blankly at a small, flickering television. You try a small smile, but she doesn't respond, her gaze fixed. You pay for your gas, pick up a bottled water, and head back towards the door, the small bell jingling again. As you reach the threshold, your eyes drift back to your car, then to the old pickup truck, and that's when you see them, two eyes. Reflected in the driver's side window of the pickup, they're not a trick of the light, they're distinct, watching. And then, slowly, deliberately, the eyes blink. You stop dead, your hand frozen on the doorframe. The rain is a muted whisper now. The faint light from the general store washes over the pickup, but the interior remains shadowed, indistinct. You can't make out a face, just the undeniable presence of those eyes, now unblinking, fixed on you. They hold no expression you can decipher, just a steady, unwavering watchfulness. It's a primal feeling, the cold realization that you are being observed, scrutinized, in this remote, late-night outpost. You quickly step out, letting the door close behind you, the faint jingle feeling like an alarm. You don't look back at the pickup as you hurry to your car, fumbling with the keys, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You throw the door open, slide inside, and lock it instantly. As you pull away, you glance in your rearview mirror. The pickup is still there, unmoving, shrouded in rain and shadow. Those eyes you're sure are still watching. It makes you wonder, when you're just passing through, in a place you don't know, how many eyes are already on you before you even realize you've been seen. You'd left the general store and its silent, watchful eyes behind, driving for what felt like forever, until the gas tank was full and the sun was finally a memory. You'd finally pulled into another rental, this one a small, modern townhouse on the edge of a quiet, unremarkable town. It felt like a world away from the isolated cabin and the unsettling stillness of the woods. The rain had picked up again, a soft, steady patter against the living room window, a familiar, comforting sound that helped ground you after the night's unnerving journey. You'd meticulously checked every lock, every window, a new, ingrained habit. The small, neat kitchen, the comfortable, if generic living room, everything felt utterly normal, a welcome antidote to the peculiar chill of the last place. You'd even ordered a pizza, the delivery driver, a reassuringly ordinary human contact. You finally allowed yourself to breathe, to relax, slumped on the sofa, listening to the rain and the low hum of the television. It was past midnight, and a strange exhaustion, both mental and physical, had begun to set in. Just as you were drifting, a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the house. Not a tentative tap, but a firm, almost insistent rap against the front door. You bolted upright, every muscle tensed, your heart instantly accelerating. Who could possibly be at your door, unannounced, at this hour? You hadn't ordered anything else, hadn't told anyone you were here. The street outside was dark, quiet, the only sound, the ceaseless rain. The town felt utterly asleep. You slowly, cautiously, rise from the sofa, your bare feet silent on the cool tile. You grab your phone, its screen, a small, bright shield in the dim room, and hold it tight. You walk towards the front door, every step measured, your ears straining over the rain's drumming. Another, cawing, this one slightly louder, more impatient. It vibrates through the solid wood, a jarring intrusion into the quiet night. You peer through the peephole. All you can see is a distorted, grainy circle of rain-streaked porch. There's a figure standing there, dark and indistinct against the night, cloaked in something dark, perhaps a heavy rain jacket. Their head is bowed slightly, shielding their face from the rain. You can't make out any features, just the general shape of a person. They aren't moving, just standing there, absolutely still, waiting. You don't recognize them. No friend, no delivery, no neighbor. Who is it? What do they want? You consider calling out, but your throat feels tight, suddenly dry. What if they respond with a name you don't know? What if they respond with your name? A third knock, this time a heavy, dull thud, as if they've used a fist, or perhaps something heavier. The whole door rattles slightly, a subtle vibration that travels up your arm. The sheer persistence is unsettling. They know someone is home. They've heard you move. They're waiting. You press yourself against the wall, away from the door, your phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. You quickly dial the emergency number, holding your thumb over the call button, ready to press it the instant you hear anything else, any attempt to force the door. The silence stretches, broken only by the rain and the frantic pounding of your own heart. They're still out there, waiting, and you have no idea who it is, or why they're knocking, unannounced, after midnight, on asterisk your door. How long do you stay hidden, listening to the rain, before you have to know. The steady, relentless downpour was a white noise machine, isolating you in the small, metal cocoon of your car. Headlights carved dull, fleeting tunnels through the sheeting rain, but mostly it was just endless black road stretching ahead, and the blurry, wet greens of the forest on either side. You were driving again, away from the quiet town and the unanswered knocks, away from the cabin and its secrets. Every mile felt like a small victory against the unsettling feeling that had begun to cling to you like damp clothes. The wipers worked frantically, a rhythmic thwack-thwack against the glass, barely keeping up with the torrent. You gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, the hum of the tires on the wet asphalt, a constant drone. It was deep into the night now, the kind of hour where the world feels stripped bare, devoid of casual observers. No other cars had passed you in what felt like an eternity. Just you, the rain, and the ribbon of highway. Then you saw them. In your rearview mirror, twin beams of light appeared, cutting through the solid wall of rain behind you. Headlights. A car. A normal occurrence, on any other night, on any other road. But tonight, after everything, it felt like a spotlight finding you in the dark. You checked your mirrors again, adjusting your focus. The lights were still there, steadily gaining. You eased off the accelerator, letting your speed drop slightly, expecting them to pass. But they didn't. They matched your pace, staying a consistent distance behind you. A pair of unwavering eyes in the blackness. The rain continued to distort the view, blurring the edges of the vehicle, making it impossible to discern anything specific about it. Just two relentless circles of light. A prickle of unease started low in your stomach. You sped up, just a little, pushing the car a few miles faster. The headlights behind you matched it, effortlessly. You slowed down, letting your speed dip below the limit, hoping they would grow impatient and overtake. Still, they hung back, a persistent, unyielding presence. Your heart began to thump a little faster, a nervous rhythm against the rain. This wasn't just another car. It felt like an extension of the unease you'd been trying to outrun. You leaned forward, squinting into the rear view, trying to pierce the veil of water. Was it a truck? A car? The rain made it a shapeless, luminous blur. It felt like they were following you. You tried the old trick, a sharp turn, then another. The road was mostly straight here, but you spotted a small, unpaved side road, barely visible through the rain. You swerved, the tires splashing loudly through a puddle, taking the turn sharply. You glanced in your mirror. The headlights, without hesitation, followed, turning into the muddy, unlit track right behind you. Your breath hitched. There was no mistaking it now. They were definitely, deliberately following you. The side road was rough, overgrown, and the rain was turning it into a river of mud. Your headlights cut through the soaking wilderness, illuminating dripping branches and towering, dark shapes. The other car's lights were a steady, inescapable presence, right behind you. Your hands trembled on the wheel. You were moving, escaping, but somehow you felt more trapped than ever. How do you outrun something that moves with you? A shadow-given light, when the world outside your small car is nothing but an endless, rainy night. The first fragile hints of dawn were bleeding into the sky, a watery gray light attempting to push back the relentless dark. The rain, though still falling steadily, had softened to a persistent drizzle, a gentle hiss against your car's exterior. You'd driven until your eyes ached and your body screamed for rest, leaving the terrifying pursuit on that muddy side road behind. The headlights had simply vanished, merging back into the featureless, rainy night, or so you desperately hoped. Now, the faint glow of an open sign for a roadside diner offered a sliver of respite. You pulled into the half-empty parking lot, the tires crunching on gravel that was slick with rainwater. The air outside was damp and cold, but the sight of the diner's warm, inviting glow felt like a lifeline. The smell of frying bacon and stale coffee washed over you as you pushed open the heavy glass door, the small bell above it jingling a welcome. Inside, the diner was sparsely populated. A couple of truckers hunched over plates at the counter, their low voices a comforting hum. You chose a booth tucked away in a corner, facing the window, giving you a clear view of your car and the entrance. You ordered a large coffee and some toast, the simple act of choosing from a menu feeling like a small victory against the chaos of the night. The warmth of the mug in your hands was a welcome comfort, chasing away the pervasive chill that had settled deep in your bones. You watched the rain sheet down the window, distorting the passing dawn into impressionistic streaks of gray and muted green. For the first time in hours, you felt a fragile sense of peace. But as you lifted the mug to your lips, your eyes drifted across the diner, past the two truckers, past the sleepy waitress polishing the counter. They stopped on a booth directly opposite yours, across the narrow aisle. It was empty, but something about it made you pause. On the worn, speckled formica table, just within the faded arc of light from the overhead lamp, lay a single, dark item. It was small, no bigger than your thumb, and partially obscured by a crumpled paper napkin. You strained your eyes, a knot tightening in your stomach. It looked like a small, flat piece of dark wood or metal, something that almost resembled the casing of a compact, old-fashioned camera, or perhaps a small, dark token. It was wet. There were subtle, shimmering moisture rings on the table around it, as if it had only just been placed there, or removed from something else. Your gaze darted to the bench seat of the empty booth. The red vinyl was slightly darker in one spot, a fresh, damp patch, not a spill. And then you saw it, barely visible under the table, almost hidden by the booth's legs. A distinct, dark, wet smudge on the linoleum floor. It was the clear impression of a bare foot, just like the one you'd seen on your rug at the cabin. The coffee turned cold in your hands. The fragile piece shattered. You scanned the other patrons, the waitress, the quiet street outside. No one. The booth was empty, but the evidence of a recent, wet presence was undeniable. It felt too familiar, too specific, to be a coincidence. Had they been here, just moments before you arrived? Or had they simply left a message, a quiet, chilling signature? Can you ever truly outrun something that seems to anticipate your every move, leaving traces of itself everywhere you try to find sanctuary?